So today we are moving on and continuing to talk about angles. But first we're going to review really quick what we've already learned about angles. So some things we've already learned about angles are, the first thing that's pretty important to know is like the different types of angles. And remember that we have angles that look like that. And that little box means that this is a right angle. And that measure of that angle is 90 degrees. Okay, so that's important to know. When it has that little box in the corner and it's kind of like a perfect, part of a perfect T or is perpendicular, that's a right angle and it's 90 degrees. The next type of angle that we recently learned about is one that just looks like a straight line. And that is called a straight angle. And remember that if you start over here and you directly turn around to the other direction, which is what this angle is doing, is turning in the exact opposite direction, that you are turning, or the angle is 180 degrees. Okay, and the last angle that we recently talked about, or the last common type of angle that we recently talked about, is when you have an angle and it's starting like that, but then it goes all the way around. Makes a full rotation. And if you can kind of see, if I take my pen and go all the way around, that is a full rotation. So it's called a full angle. And it would have another little arrow right there because that arrow would go all the way around. A full rotation or a full angle, and that is 360 degrees. So that's important to know. So the other two things that we learned, and this is not super needed for today, but just to review really quick, is that vertical angles are angles that are opposite or kind of mirrored. So if I have these two angles, angles 1 and 2, those are vertical angles because they are opposite sides, they're mirrored. And then if we have adjacent, those are angles that are right next to each other. So like this angle and this angle, angles 3 and 4, would be adjacent because they're right next to each other and they share this same side. Okay, so that's kind of a review of what we've already learned about angles. Today, we are actually going to need to know about right angles. We're going to need to know about this type of angle, right angles. And think, how many degrees is a right angle? Oh, right, it's 90 degrees. So what we are learning that's new today really depends on you knowing that a right angle is 90 degrees. Okay, so have that in your brain. Right angle, 90 degrees. 90 degrees, right angle. You can also tell that it's a right angle because it has this little box right there. Okay, so have the number 90 in your brain today because what we are talking about is super related to that. What we are talking about today is called complementary angles. And this sounds really complicated, but it's not. What complementary angles are separate angles. It could be 2, 3, 4, however many angles, but the degrees that they have together, the measure of their angles together added together is 90 degrees. Together they make a right angle. So angles whose sum equals 90 degrees. And the easier way to say that is angles that add to 90 degrees. So if you have two angles and the degrees, the measure in degrees of those angles add up to 90 degrees, they are what is called complementary because together they make a right angle. So an illustration of that is I have this right angle. It's a right angle. I'm telling you it's a right angle. But I might have two smaller angles that combine to make that angle. So I could have like this. And this one right here might be 30 degrees. And this one right here might be 60 degrees. So the 30-degree angle, this one right here, and the 60-degree angle together make a 90-degree right angle. So these two angles, the 60-degree and the 30-degree, are complementary angles. Okay, so some more examples of that, and we don't even need pictures to know. We can just add them up and see if it's 90. Some more examples. You could have, if you want it to add up to 90, you could have 89 degrees and a 1 degree angle. Those add up to 90 degrees, so that those are complementary angles. You could have 40 degrees and 50 degrees. That adds up to 90 degrees. So those are complementary angles. You could also have 45 degrees and 45 degrees. 45 plus 45 equals 90. So they are together complementary angles. Non-examples. Non-examples are like if you have, let's see, 30 degrees and 5 degrees. Those are two angles, but together they make 35. They don't add up to 90. So that's a non-example. Those are not complementary angles. So we know complementary angles are angles that add up to 90 degrees. And one other thing I want to add in examples is that you could have 3 angles or 4 angles that are complementary, as long as all of them together add to 90 degrees. So you could have 30 degrees and 30 degrees and 30 degrees, and those 3 angles are complementary. So you can have more than just 2. Okay, so test yourself. Answer this. Complementary angles add up to how many degrees? How many degrees have to be in a pair of complementary angles? If you said 90, good job. 90 degrees in complementary angles. So this next problem says write possible angle measurements for angles 1 and 2. Remember, they have to add up to 90. So this is a right angle. Telling you it's a right angle. I want you to write the possible angle measures for angles 1 and 2. Make them up. Okay, as long as they add to 90, that you're going to be right. So pause this video, think of 2 angles that could add up to 90 degrees. All right, hopefully you paused the video. There's lots of options. There's tons of options. If you do something like 20 degrees and 70 degrees, those add up to 90. You could have said so many things. You could have said 19 degrees and 71 degrees. 19 plus 71 is 90. You could have said 30 degrees and 60 degrees. As long as your 2 angle measures add up to 90 degrees, it's going to work. Okay. So when we know that 2 complementary angles, or 2 angles that are complementary, and then we know that that equals 90, we can start solving problems with that information. So, for example, problem 1 right here, this says, make sure we can see it really well. This says to write and solve an equation to find the value of x. So we have some pieces of information. These are 2 angles. And this box right here means that it's 90-degree angle. We can trust that it's a 90-degree angle. It's a right angle because it has the box. It says write and solve an equation to find the value of x. So I know that this whole thing is a 90-degree angle. I know that the whole thing is a 90-degree angle. I also know that that 90 degrees equals the 71 plus the x, or the x plus 71. So 90 equals, it's that x angle plus the 71 degree angle. Okay, so here's an equation. But there's another way that we can write this equation that might be easier for you to solve, which is, I know to find x, that the whole thing together is 90 degrees, but x is whatever is left over after we get rid of this 71. So 71 degrees is made up by this angle, and the rest of it is x. We want to figure out what x is to get to 90. So we want to know how much more we need to get from 71 to 90. So what we can do is subtract 71. Okay, so x equals 90 minus 71. To figure out that angle, we need to figure out, okay, we know the whole thing is 90. We take away 71 to figure out how much x has to be. And you remember, you can use calculators. You can use whatever you need. I'm trying to teach you about angles. I don't mind if you do the calculating part with a calculator. So x equals 90 minus 71. That equals 19. So x has to equal 19, or you could say 19 degrees if you want. Okay, so our equations for this are, okay, the angle that we're trying to figure out, if it's complementary, it's going to be 90 minus the angles that we know. All right, so similar for number 2. This is a right angle. They are telling us it's a right angle. Yay, they're giving us free information. So we know it's a 90 degree angle altogether. We're trying to figure out what x equals. That's the missing angle. It says find the missing angle. So we know that, oops, I wrote it backwards, didn't I? I did. Well, you could do it like that, so we'll start with that. We know that 90 equals x plus that 21 degrees. And so we know that the x plus the 21 has to equal the right angle, the 90 degrees. So I'm going to switch this around a little bit to make it easier to calculate. And what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, I know that x has to equal 90, because the whole thing is 90, minus that 21, minus 21. So now to figure out what x equals, what the missing angle is, we just take 21, because that's what we know, away from 90, because the whole thing is 90. So think about what 90 minus 21 is. $90 minus 21. If you said 69, nice job, 69. So this is x equals 69 degrees. All right, see if on the next one you can decide what the equation would be. So we're gonna start with, let's start with x equals, what is the measure of this whole angle? The whole thing, this one plus this one together. We've got an x and a 7 degrees. What is the measure of all of that together? It is 90. And then what are we taking away to figure out x? We know that this whole thing is 90, but we want to take something away, the part that we know, to just get x by itself. What would that be? We want to take away 7. Okay, because the whole thing is 90. 7 is right there. So x has to equal 90 minus 7, which would be 83. The last problem, I want you to pause and try on your own. Once you've figured it out, I want you to watch the rest of the video and see if you got it correct. This one, you are finding the missing angle again. See if I can get this straight. There we go. So again, a right angle. One of the angles is 80 degrees and one of them we don't know yet. So pause the video and see if you can figure this out. All right. Hopefully you actually paused the video. So I know that if I'm trying to find x, that it's going to equal the whole thing. And we know they're telling us the whole thing is 90 degrees. That whole thing, that whole 90-degree angle, minus the part that they're telling us. This is 80 degrees right here. So minus 80 degrees. So that means that this little section right here, to get from 80 to the full 90, x has to equal 10 degrees. Okay, so when you are hearing complementary angles, add, oh, you can't see that, add up to 90 degrees. Okay, complementary angles add up to 90 degrees. Super important. Okay, that is what we are really, really focusing on in this lesson. All right, good luck with that tomorrow. You're going to be practicing. And remember, go back, watch the video again, or pause at certain parts if you want extra practice with it.